Hello all, thanks for joining me today. I am going to be doing something a little different than what my channel is used to, which is typically flying low and slow, and today we are going to be going high and fast in this wonderful 747-8. Now, there was an update a while back now, I don't know, maybe a month, 2 months ago, that updated the avionics in the 747 and also the 787, and it was done by Working Title Technologies, who is just fantastic as overhauling any of the avionics, and it's great that Asobio is working with them to take care of things. Now, the one thing that sort of stopped me from wanting to jump into these airliners is just they're a little in depth. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of flow that needs to be taken care of, and I haven't really found a great tutorial online that does like a complete flight. Well, lo and behold, if you go over to Microsoft Flight Simulator website, their homepage, and underneath media, if you come down to this very obscure small link that says download PDF manuals for our local legend aircraft, which it's inaccurate even in its description, but if you click on it and then scroll down, you see that we have all this documentation for a lot of the aircraft. Not all, but a lot of the aircraft that have been released or updated, including the 747-8. So you can see that Working Title actually made a manual. And when I say manual, it is actually a full tutorial flight from gate to gate. So I was reading through it. I did it once and I was like, that was really great that they put this all together. It would be nice if there was a video that went along with it. So that's what we're going to do today as best as possible. Live weather is going to change things a little bit, but overall it's going to be the same flight. We just might have a different sort of approach and things like that, which we will figure out. I'm going to keep the actual approach the same. I had a look at the weather, and it's just unavoidable to have a little bit of a crosswind in Dulles at the moment. So we're going from O'Hare to Dulles, two very busy airports. It gives us our cruising altitude, distance, alternate. If you want to go through and set up all the weights and balances, it gives you all of that information a little bit further down, gives you some tips on keybinds. Like I said, here's all the weights and balances, what gate even that to be selected to. Everything on here is fantastic. They even break down all of the cockpits to help with doing the tutorial. So I definitely suggest going through and reading all of the sort of diagrams and where things are located before jumping straight into the flight, because it will make life a lot easier to learn where things are and set up some custom views to get that all easier for you to move around the cockpit. So it goes through on all of that type of stuff, but we're going to jump on down to really where we start getting into our sort of like power checklist and things like that. So I'm going to have this open on a different screen. I apologize if my head tracker every once in a while turns over to the left, and you're like, why is the head tracker over there? And it's because I'm looking at the other screen. I'm going to try and switch it on and off as best as possible, so that way that doesn't happen, but I'm sure I will forget at some point. So let's go ahead and jump on into the cockpit. I'm actually going to close this one down, and you can see we're sitting at a very busy O'Hare, lots of traffic coming around. If you're wondering what I'm using for my traffic, it's actually the free flight injector. I think it's like FSLTL from Fly-by-Wire. It's fantastic. You can do a lot of settings in order to get the performance needs that you want, but it is a live traffic program that does still work with the in-game ATC, so I suggest checking that out as well. So let's go ahead and hop on into the cockpit, and you can see we are cold and dark. It's a light rain coming through O'Hare at the moment. I'm sure this is the weekend of 4th of July. There's been a whole bunch of storms rolling through. I believe I read this morning there was like 9,000 flights canceled throughout the U.S. So weather has not been fantastic. But we are going to fly with live weather. Let's go ahead and get things fired up on electrical or ground power with the electrical units here. So external power units. So your first step is just going to be popping on your battery and then getting your standby power to auto. You can see we have a little bit of lights coming on. We do see that we have external power available to us, so we'll go ahead and pop those on, and even more lights come on for us. Straight after that, we're going to be going into our pre-flight checklist where we want to get our IRS aligned. This is like our navigation sort of system to get our position and everything into the CDU and have those talk nicely together. We're going to make sure our guard is closed on our emergency light switch. Wipers are off. I'm not going to even use them because even if we encounter a lot of rain, because Microsoft has not animated any sort of clearing of the rain, so it doesn't do anything. From there, our yaw dampener switches, we want to make sure that those are on. They're listed as in-op, but we still want those to be listed as on. Our nav and logo lights can then come on. Panel lights are as required. There's quite a few lights around the cockpit. I'm just going to crank them all up because it makes it typically I wouldn't do this if I was just doing this flight by myself, because the it's a dark cockpit, but I prefer to have an actual where it's just sort of like lighting up the important bits, I would say, versus lighting up all of the separate areas. I gotta remember which keys I have here. I thought there was one other one down here. I could be wrong. No, I think that is it. We will put on the same on the first officers. Let's get these out of here. So we're going to come over onto these guys. There they are. And crank all those up so that way, again, we have as much lighting as we possibly can for the video because it is this sort of dark brown area. I swear there's... Oh, there we go. Those were the ones I was thinking of. Those all the way up. All right. So from here, we are just going to check that the parking brake is set, which is right down here, and we are good to go. From here, I believe we're going to jump on down to setting up our CDU. Yes, we are. So this will be the first page you see on your CDU, and we need to basically align this up now that our IRS has that information. So we can come over to our pause init, and you can see we've got these sort of like blank coordinates here. Now think of this step like a copy and paste. This is what the aircraft is picking up as our GPS position. We can go ahead and select copy. This puts it down into the scratch pad, and then you can paste it. And that will get us all aligned on our sort of navigation screens and all the rest of it. Just sort of like ties everything together. From here, we get to start entering in our route, which we are currently sitting at O'Hare. And you're just going to kick the select key on the corresponding sort of line. Then we're going over to Dulles. I've got in our flight number as BOE1, which they also say in the tutorial to do. So I'm trying to keep everything apples to apples here. So now our route screen, this is where you're going to start putting in your waypoints. Now I want to bring up, just to help kind of explain this a little bit better, let me close this down here. So this is our flight plan in Navigraph, and Navigraph is great for a lot of reasons, but I'm going to show why this is pretty cool to understand what we're doing in the CDU. So we're not flying a departure, we're kind of doing a direct mobile, even though we're going to have to do sort of like a manual turn to come over to that, which we'll talk about while it's sort of happening. And then we've just got a couple of waypoints, so Mobile, Adime, and Ashen. But at Ashen, you can see we are joining this Jetway 60, and it does have other waypoints on it, and it does change course a little bit there. Well, you could, if you wanted to, go through and enter in all these waypoints. Then you can see at this Delta Julia Bravo, we are then jumping on a different jetway, which is 162. So you could be like, okay, well, I need to put that in because that's at least an intersection, and then work our way down all the way to our arrival, and then our arrival down on into our ILS approach. And you can see here we're doing basically what's called vectors to final. So what's cool about seeing it this way, one, it demonstrates what we're actually doing. You can see that there's turns involved on these jetways, and we do not need to enter any of those waypoints because we're on jetways. So if we come back on over to the CDU here, our first waypoint is mobile. So we're going to go ahead and type that one on in, and I put in model. It's mobile. And then we're going to, what was it? It's a dime, I believe. A dime, yeah. A-D-M-E. And lastly, we're doing Ashen. So we'll pop that in. Now, those are all, direct to, direct to, direct to. There's no necessarily via. But at Ashen, think of this like you're on Ashen Street, and Ashen Street is where you can jump on Jetway 60 or Interstate 60. I like to think of it in terms of like getting on and off roads and things like that. So this was our sort of like roads we took to get to our interstate or jetway, which is Jetway 60. Now, this is saying, okay, you're going from Ashen via Juliet 60. Then where do you want to get off? Well, we're not getting off necessarily Jetway 60. We're just going to merge onto Jetway 162. So we can just actually type in that Jetway and do via. And you notice it put in that waypoint for us, which we showed on Navigraph. So it's very clever how it's able to know what you're trying to do. And then our last waypoint before we jump on our arrival is Mike Golf Whiskey. And so we can pop that in there. So that is our sort of route. And we can then come over to how we want to either depart or arrive with this route. So if we come over here, we're not doing a departure, but we do want to select our runway, which, oops, let me go back here. You can see we have pages here. We're on page 1 of 4. This is your next previous page. We want to do 27 left, I believe, is what the tutorial is saying. And this might not be correct for what currently is going on at the airport. But looking at the wind, no matter what, I think we're going to have a little bit of a crosswind. So that's all we need to do for our arrival. Our departure. Now we need to come over to our arrival. This we actually have a planned arrival to get into the airport. And think of arrivals and departures as same again, like traffic lanes, so that way ATC can actually guide everyone on the same path without having everybody trying to get to the airport from different directions. So we're going to say that we are using the Gibbs 4, and you can see that our transition is our last waypoint on our route, which is that Mike Golf Whiskey. So we definitely want to start it there. And on the tutorial, I believe it's 01 right. Let me just double check. ILS 01 right. Yes, so we want to do ILS 01 right. We can go ahead and pop that in. And that is all good to go. What we want to do now is actually have a look at the flight plan and check things over to make sure there's not any errors, or we might have typed something in wrong. And the way you need to do that is on your actual little selector here. You can rotate through from, maps, VOR, approaches, all that type of stuff. We want it to be on plan. And you can see it's in sort of blue dashes right now, which means it's not activated, but it is sort of like preloaded, if you will. So we can come over to the legs page, and you can see we have this step. If you notice that you don't have the step button, it's because you're not on the plan page. you want to make sure that you're on the plan page in order to go through each waypoint. And we're just going to step through. You can see that it is corresponding to what we have selected. And what we're doing is just checking to make sure that that all makes sense according to our actual flight plan. And as we go through, this is when we're on our approach and we have all these different sections. And then as we come on down, you can see that we are now at the vectors and it's got us going over to Mosby and we are good to go. There is no discontinuities. Sometimes there can be a discontinuity if you activated it before checking it through. There might be some in there, and it talks about in the tutorial. All you need to do is delete those out, and then it continues on as should be. You can notice here that we do not have that connected, which is the same as what we showed on our Navigraph flight plan, where we are getting vectors, and typically ATC would tell you like, hey, turn to a heading of 160, expect ILS runway 01 right, and let them know when you're lined up on the approach. But we are good to go. So from there, we can actually come back to our route and we can activate it. Now, once you activate it, we want to hit execute, and that's why that green lights up there. And now you can see everything is in purple, which means that it is loaded and active, and that's what our aircraft is actually going to fly. There's a couple of other steps that we need to do in the CDU, and that is one, you don't have to do this, but it is in the tutorial and good practice. And what they would do in real life is actually have a alternate, and we're just going to put in Philadelphia. From there, we can go back to our route page, and then we are going to do our performance initialization, or the perf init page, and we're going to go through and sort of fill this in. So we're doing flight level 370. Our fuel, this will sense what our zero fuel weight is, so we can click on that. It puts it down in the scratch pad, and then we can click on it again and it puts it in there. As far as reserves go, they're saying that we need 13.8, which is roughly 45 minutes, and our cost index is going to be 50. So we have all of that in. Next, we're going to come over to our thrust limits. Now, they say to leave everything pretty much at 100%, which is fine. I find that makes the transitions in the climb a little steep, and that's just down to the way the flight simulator, I think, handles this information. If you want it to be a little bit more gradual, you can definitely reduce power down. So you can see if you come down here, we're only going to be doing a max of 91%, but we'll stick to what they recommend at the 100%. So then we're going to come over to our takeoff reference page. Now, this has got some information on here that we need to actually calculate first on the second page. So this is where we need to get our current weather. Now, same again, I come over to Navigraph. You can find this information inside the game as well, but I just like using this program for it. It just works out very well. We can come over and actually just open up the airport, and if we click over to weather, it is going to give us the actual raw data there, but it also breaks it down for us here. So we've got variable at 5 knots and a temperature of 26 degrees. So we are going to put in that to 6 degrees. Wind, we're just going to do 0 at 5 knots. I don't think I've put in 0 before, if it'll let you do it. I don't think it will, actually. Let's clear that out. I wonder if we need to put in 3 zeros and then 5. Will that let us do it? Oh, okay, so it just puts it as 360, which is, I guess, not correct for what we want, because there's no direction on there, but we'll leave it at that. There's probably a way to make that more accurate. I don't know what you do for when it's a calm day in here, but if you know, let me know down in the comments below. But you can see that added in some other stuff for what the runway we're on and all that type of stuff. and is good to go. We're going to come back to the previous page now, and we're going to put in the information that all ties together to get our takeoff data. So the minimum flaps for the 747 is going to be 10, and you can see that it did populate our reference speeds there. You do have to click on those to sort of acknowledge them, and it puts it all in for us. And then same with our CG, it's going to calculate that for us, and we can pop that in, and it gives us our trim setting for our current weights and all of that sort of stuff. And it's saying 6.8, which we will pop in just a little bit. So I believe after that point, yeah, now we just want to double check really, and this is what it is just really a check. There's one section that we're going to do about the weather forecast. You don't have to do it, but we're going to follow this tutorial all the way through. So we want to check that our cruise altitude is correct. We are on econ speed. It gives us our knots and then our Mach, and then our transition speed from 250 to accelerate up to that 326 is going to be 10,000 feet, which is normal for the US. And then same with our transition altitude, which is when we're going to change over to standard barometric pressure in the US is 18,000 feet. So that all looks good there. Next, we can come over and check our cruise, and you can see, same again, we've got the correct information there. This page becomes very important during our actual cruise because it will give us a lot of great information about the sort of like top of descent and things like that. Lastly, we have our descent, and we do just same again, want to double check to make sure all of that makes sense. And we do have this forecast button on here. Now, what this is to help the aircraft know what the winds are going to be during our descent. So they do provide us a nice link. Let me bring this open here to have a look at the wind data as we're sort of coming in. So I gotta remember. On that link, we're going to be able to scroll down here and have a look at the winds and temps data. And our closest one to Dulles is going to be this EKN. So if we open up that, you can see that down here we have all that data. And they recommend in the tutorial to do 9,000 feet, 24,000 feet, and I believe 39,000 feet. Let's double check. Yes. So what you want to do is copy this information over. They go through on how to sort of decipher this, but essentially this would be 280 with 25 knots. This number here is going to be your temperature. If there's a plus in front of it, that means it is, positive 11 degrees. If there's a minus or nothing in there, then that means that it is below 0. Typically, once you get up to a certain altitude, it's not going to be above anyway, so they don't bother putting in the plus or minus. So what I like to do is come over here, and I'm just going to put in those flight levels first, and then we can come back and enter in the actual data. So starting off with 9,000 feet, we're at that 280 at 25. So 280 at 25. Go ahead and pop that in. And then we have at 24,000, 290 at 22. 290 at 22. Pop that in. And then lastly, we have at 39,000 feet, 300 at 52. 300 at 52. And we'll pop that in. And that's just going to help plan the sort of descent rate and speeds and all that sort of stuff to have an accurate forecast in there. Again, like I said, not necessary, but you would still want to do that if you wanted to do a more thorough programming of your CDU. So from here, I believe we can actually just execute. Let me just make sure that they don't have any other. Yep, so we're good there. So we can just execute that to make sure that everything is all loaded in. From here, I think we actually get to get things fired up and get our pushback started. So let's go ahead and move on to our pushback and engine start. So before we get our pushback, and the way these airliners work is typically you are firing up everything during your pushback versus sitting at the gate with your engines running, because obviously we're not going to be able to spin things around, and we don't want, the ground crew near the aircraft while we're starting up those engines. So what we need to do is first come up to our overhead panel, and we want to turn on our fuel pumps there. From that, it does say about your center and stabilizer tanks. Typically, those are going to be empty unless you're doing some ridiculously long flight. From there, we are going to get our APU started. Now, our APU is going to be your auxiliary power unit, and you just kind of rotate that over to start. If we come over and have a look at our status page, you can see on there that the EGT is sort of firing up. And if we come to the outside of the aircraft, you can actually hear that little APU going. So that is at the tail of the plane. And you can see a little bit of heat coming out of there. That's where the APU is located, is in here. And it's just another little engine to, get you power to the aircraft, because after we get that all started up, which if we look back up to the top here, you can see that we have our APU generators now listed as available. So we're going to go ahead and click on those, and that allows us to disconnect from the ground power units. It automatically does it in the tutorial. I believe they say that you do need to disconnect them after we get a few other sort of switches on, but they are showing as available, which means that you're not connected. So from here, we're going to come over to our sort of like econ settings, and we want to make sure that our trim air is on and that the recirculating air is on. And then these packs are essentially like your AC. So we can turn that on, and you're going to start to hear the air sort of rushing through the vents. Then the isolation switches are, set to go through, and our APU bleed is on. Now, they don't mention when to turn on the engine bleed. At least I might have missed it, but I do it now just as I'm working through my flow, and we are good to go. And we can also now double check on our screen here to make sure that our APU is running and everything is good. Now, you will see on here that you have this CAS warning of fuel tank / engine. Now, that goes back to what I was referring to with these center and stabilizer tanks. And right now they're being cross-fed, and we do not want that to happen because they are empty. So we are just going to come over and turn those off. And if you look now, that warning has actually gone away, which is great. So from here, we got everything started up, so we can go ahead and make sure that our seatbelt signs are on and get the pushback started. So if we have a look down here, this is our seatbelt sign. We can go ahead and turn that over. I like to give a little chime to the flight crew as well. And then we're going to, this is where it says to turn off your external power, which is already off. And now we're going to get our anti-ice switches all over to auto. And then get our window heats on as well. Next, we're going to let the ground crew know that we are about to fire up our engine. So we're going to get our beacon on. Now, this is the part of if you're a passenger in an aircraft and you're noticing where you're like, oh, sweet, air conditioning is on. And then you start to back up and get your pushback. And you're like, oh, my God, it's getting sweltering in here. It's because we have to turn those off for starting up the engine. So from here, we go ahead and get our pushback going. But I like to have a quick look at the airport diagram to just get an idea how far we can go back, and also where we want to turn to if we want to sort of address that. So we're just coming over to 27 left. We're already pointed in a good direction here. So we're just going to back up and then make a turn to come down to 27 left. So really no need to give the ground crew any additional information as far as our pushback goes. So I like to just come through and we're going to hit Shift P. I'm going to disable my parking brake here. And then, I don't know, this plane is so tall. We can just barely see the tug moving into position. Now, starting this up is nice and easy. There's like an auto start feature that is with it. So if we switch over to our engine screen here, what you do is you just come down here, and these are like your fuel cutoff valves. You're going to start with engine 4, turn that on, and then go ahead and click start. And you'll notice that it's going to say auto start and start ramping up. So then you just repeat the process for all the other engines. Just double check that auto start does come on. And very good there. And finally, engine 1. And you can hear those starting to fire on up. And you can monitor those to make sure that everything is going well, and they are. From here, we are going to go through and do our sort of like after start checklist, which once we are back, let's have a little look outside. Back this up a little bit. This aircraft is just so gigantic. We'll go back just a little bit further, and then all we're going to be doing is turning to taxi on to 27 left there. So once you stop your pushback, you want to put your parking brake back on while we go through our after startup checklist. Now this is where we are going to get those pack switches back on because our engines are running and have enough power, and that wonderful AC is going to be blasting through. We can also turn off our APU because we are under engine power now. And we're going to come down to our transponder, which is here, and we're going to turn that over to TA. Flaps, we're going to go ahead and set those, which we said flaps 10. So come on down to flaps 10. And after that, we can get our trim set. Now, there's a couple places to see your trim. Here is one. If you're on the actual, let's see, which page is it? The hydraulic page? No, where is that one at? Flight control. That's what I'm looking for. You can see our trim is there. This is also how you check to make sure that your controls are free and clear, because obviously we can't have a look at those in this gigantic aircraft. So we're going to set our trim, which if we need to double check, if we come back over to our init reference page, our trim is 6.8. So we can come over here and we're going to set that to 6.8 there, and you can also confirm it on that page as well. I'm just going to come back over to the stat page on this display. So after that, we're going to, typically you would have gotten IFR clearance, but for the sake of this tutorial, they are saying that we are going up to 5,000 feet. One thing that I might have skipped over in the initial part of getting our reference speeds, which is if we have a look at those reference speeds, our V2 is 160. That is what you want to put in your indicated airspeed selector on your glare shield or your autopilot panel, if you want to refer to it as that. And then our heading mode, we want to set to our actual runway heading, which is going to be, I believe it's 273 is the actual heading, but you can just put in 270 as well if you don't have a chart to check that. Then we're going to make sure that our flight director is on, that our local pressure is set. I'm just going to hit the key command B for Bravo instead of going back and checking the data to actually set that. But if you wanted to, you would just turn the knob here to set that manually. And then we already verified our taxi route. I don't believe they mentioned this in this part of the checklist, which they don't. If we come up to the overhead panel, we're going to go ahead and turn on our taxi lights as we taxi on down the runway. From here, we can go ahead and unlock our parking brake. And I don't know why we are going backwards. Oh, I accidentally clicked this into reverse. That's better. I don't know how long we were sitting with our reverse thrusters and they were just sitting in beta, but that is comical. All right, so this does require a little bit of oomph to get going, and the speeds are deceiving because we're so high up in the air. This is just such a massive, massive aircraft. Oh, we're just going to get us turned over. And typically once we get rolling, it's like a freight train where, you know, you don't need to keep much thrust in at all. You can just almost bring it back to idle, if not at idle, and just let it keep on coasting on down. Your ground speed is right here, so you can see we are climbing the charts. And typically I don't like to go above 30, so I'm just bringing it back to idle here, and we will just let it cruise on down. All right, so as far as our before takeoff checklist, we can kind of just refer to it a little bit right now. Typically you would pay attention to taxiing, but there's just a lot of checks. We already checked our flight controls. Those are free and clear. Our V speeds, we had a look already down on the CDU. We confirmed that our V2 speed is set. Our altitude is set. Our transponder, we're going to switch that over to TARA once we get sort of down and holding short there. Our auto brake, we want to set to RTO and just confirm that your speed brake is actually down. From there, we are confirming that our flaps are set, our trim is set, and then we're going to take care of our lights before we get onto the runway, and then we're going to get a couple of things set up with our actual autopilot. So we will continue on down here. I don't know where the step is for us to arm our auto throttle. They must talk about it somewhere in the description, but I don't believe it's on the checklist, but we definitely want to arm that auto throttle. Now I'm applying the brakes right now, which is nice and early. It you know, same again, like it's a big plane, it's heavy, and it's like a freight train. So from here, let's just go ahead and get our transponder over to TARA, and we've got our auto throttle armed. We're going to go ahead and get lined up on the runway here. So we're going to go ahead and get our landing lights on. We can turn off those. We'll leave our taxi lights on. And this aircraft is really, you get that nose beyond where you think you should be just because it's got quite an ass on her that we want that to come around. And we'll get lined up here. And it's going to have us go through and enable our LNAV and VNAV. Now, it says as required. Now, we're going to be flying heading mode as we go out. So I'm going to arm that instead. All right. Everything on this, you just sort of do, you know, nice and slow, like it's, you know, you're driving a big old bird here. So I'm just going to pop in the parking brake really quick while we go through and make sure everything's good. It's nice. We do not have any cast warnings, which you want to double check. We've got all of that information in, which we sort of went over on the taxi. Now we're going to do VNav, and then I'm going to enable our actual heading mode, which I believe if we hit select, that puts it on. Yes, so you can see here we have heading select. They're recommending that if you just put on LNav, we've got that sort of armed now. If you don't have heading select on, no, how you turn that off actually? Let's see, LNav. Nope, now that we've got it armed on there, I don't think it'll let us turn that off until we intercept our LNav. But it shows in there to have this say Toga Toga because that is the setting for taking off, really. But this is fine to have it on our heading hold as well. Now, the way the auto throttle works in this, I believe that is the switch. There's two of them for each side, there and there. Now, it's not easy to hit those, and it's also, there's some steps that they say about going up to 30% and then up to the green line and entering auto throttle before 50 knots. To simplify that, all I do is I hit auto throttle right off the gate, and then we are really good to just get on into the air. You can hit autopilot, I believe, as low as 50, and then you are really good to go. They have, oh, there is the auto throttle armed at the bottom of the before takeoff checklist. They talk about the auto throttle, which I just mentioned, and then that's our takeoff checklist, and then we've got our after takeoff, which is just checking gears up, retracting flaps as per the schedule, which is going to be on our little ticker tape there. Auto brakes automatically come off, but we want to double check those, and then our overhead lights will really just, actually the only thing I didn't turn on the overhead lights is our strobe light, but we're going to leave on those. We'll turn off the taxi light, but we'll leave on our landing lights up until we hit 10,000 feet. So let's go ahead and get everything into practice here. I'm going to bring our screen over to the map because we're going to fly out and actually have to do a direct to that first waypoint on our leg, which is the mobile. So all I'm going to do is I have a keybind for our toga, so I'm going to go ahead and hit that, and you'll notice that starts coming up, and we are away. They're going to call out V1, and we rotate very soon after V1, and you just want to keep an eye on your speed here. There we go. Let's go ahead and bring that back. All right, we are up. We can bring that gear up. And from here, we can actually go ahead and turn on that autopilot. And you'll notice now that we are in throttle reference, we can already bring up notch of flaps there. You can see we're just about to cross over the 5 there. You know what? I don't know what that warning is for. If someone can tell me, that would be great. I think it has to do with the flaps, but I could be wrong. It happens sometimes and not all the times for me. And then we are above flap 1, so we can take care of that. And then this last one, which is up, and we just want to make sure that our flaps are fully up, and they are. So we're going to level off at that 250 and 5,000. We're going to just say that we got clearance up to 39,000 already. So let's just go ahead and rotate that. And this is where I said, like, this climb is just too aggressive. We're going up at, what would that be? Right around 15 degrees at, 6,000 feet per minute, which is probably fine for passengers, but it just feels so steep. Looks like we're going to go through a little bit of rain there. So I just like to get this all tuned over. It probably actually goes quicker because this, I believe, exponentially goes up. So we are going up to flight level 370. All right, so we've got that configured. We're flying out on our runway heading. We do have LNAV sort of armed, if you will, underneath there. And so if we come on down to our CDU, the way going direct is going to be clicking on the waypoint you want to go direct to, and then clicking on the selection key at the top of your legs. So we want to go direct to mobile, so that's going to put it down in your scratch pad and go ahead and hit it. And then you'll notice that nothing's changed yet because we haven't hit the execute button. As soon as we do that, it turns purple, and since we had LNAV armed, you can see that there we go, that's turning over. We just passed over 10,000 feet already, so we can actually come up and turn off our landing lights and make sure taxi lights are off, and otherwise we are good on our overhead lights. And we're making our way over to mobile. So you can see on here, we've got mobile listed. It's letting us know the actual distance, and we can, just monitor that as we do our climb out of here. We can have a nice view of Chicago area here. We're going to get into the clouds very, very quickly. Looks like we're just going to go right over that rain. We can check on the radar as well. So if we click on weather radar, you can see that does work, and we do have that information. We can bring the range in a little bit closer even. So it does look like we are going to fly through this little bit of mess. We might just go over it, which will be nice to do instead of flying into it. But the radar does work very nicely. So after we've got that done, it goes through and talks about our climb. Really, there's not a lot that we're going to do after this point until we come up to 18,000 feet, which is when we're just going to switch over to standard pressure and continue climbing up to our flight level 370. All right, so we've been in our cruise for a little while here. We're at flight level 370, well above the clouds. We do have a little bit in front of us there, high level cloud layer, but I think we're going to be just fine. I did want to come down and show you on the CDU the cruise page that it comes to. You're going to access that by coming over to your VNav page, and you can see you have multiple pages here. It automatically switches to the stage of flight that you're in, and you could see here that it's got our info. Now, what wasn't being shown while we're on the ground is this 2T/D, or 2 top of descent, and it'll give us the time in Zulu time and the miles until we are at it. So if we come up to our main dash here, the best way that we do have the time there, but if you click on this little clock button there, it's always nice to have that showing sort of like second hands as well. But we are currently at 18:06, and so we've got 15 minutes to go until we're at our top of descent. Now, before we get to, in the tutorial, they recommend about before 10 nautical miles out from your top of descent to get your glare shield sort of prepped for that. And what that means is if we come over, and they have a chart in the tutorial, but same again, I come over to Navigraph because it conveniently puts all the charts for your flight plan right where you need them. So we're going to look at the Gibbs for arrival that we put in. So we're going to be heading across here. Actually, if I do an overlay, we can see where we're currently at. So there we are, flying along. We're on that Jetway 162, and we're coming over to, this is where the arrival starts in green. So you can see these sort of numbers in blue here. These are our constraints for our altitude for this particular arrival. Now, I think in reality what you would set in the CDU, or sorry, on your glare sheet for your altitude, would be each one of these steps as you go down, just as a sort of safety measure instead of just setting it to the lowest point. Could be wrong, but for us and this tutorial, it says that our lowest point on the arrival is this one here at Tasman at 7,000 feet. And then we're going to get some other instructions as we come through, which we're going to simulate ATC is actually giving us, which is essentially after we level off at 7,000 feet, we're going to stay at 7,000 feet until we pass Seob, and then we're going to descend down to 5,000 to Mike J, and then we're going to actually do a direct to Mosby as if ATC said, okay, yeah, you're cleared to direct to Mosby, expect, ILS runway 1 right. So that's the sort of plan. Now we can do that 7,000 at any point. So let's go back over into the aircraft. And if we want to, we could actually rotate this down all the way to 7,000 feet. You notice that the aircraft is not changing altitude at the moment. And it will automatically, when it gets to that top of descent in 92 miles, or in probably now about 12 minutes or so, it will start doing a nice casual descent all the way down. So just wanted to check in real quick. We have started our descent for a little bit now. We are, coming up to these waypoints, and you can see that they do give us the constraints on the MFD there for us, which is awesome. You can see our speed is right where it should be as far as it's trying to slow down to 280, but as we're coming down, it should hopefully get to 280, because if we look on here, I don't know why it says 240. Somebody else mentioned this in a tutorial. It should be 250 for these waypoints, but and you might even have a different assignment, but I think we'll be probably going a little bit slower at that point. I'll have to double check what they want us to do in the tutorial. But if we go back, you can see that 280 is really at, I guess we should be going it now, and we can pop on that speed brake to help slow us down a little bit and pull that back. And you'll see that we will start to come down a little bit quicker to try and get to our 280. And, it's helping out a little bit. Our descent rate increased because we are adding more drag on there. So I don't know if that's how this should react, if this is calculating to get to this point at 280, which will be interesting to see, because we've got 7 miles to go until we get there. You can see this is our VNAV sort of profile. We're just passing 18,000 feet, so we want to go ahead and switch back over to normal barometric pressure. Same again, I cheat. I just hit the shortcut key B for Bravo, and that puts in the correct barometric pressure for us. And yeah, so, it's getting us 280 right there. We can definitely take off that speed brake. And all good to go there. We're going to continue on down our descent. And really at this point, typically I wait to 10,000 feet. I believe the tutorial has it coming on a little bit sooner as when we start our descent. But we can go ahead and switch our seatbelt sign to on. And again, I always like to just give the flight crew a little ding there to let them know. We still have the weather radar on. We're not showing any rain coming through, so we shouldn't have to worry about any real icing problems. And we're just going to keep up. I thought I hit standard on there. Must have missed it there. There we go. So 2998, and we are now on the actual barometric pressure. And it looks like, yeah, we've got okay weather. Let's zoom out a little bit here, and not showing anything on there. Let's go to the map and double check there. Yep, no, that's VOR. We were on map. And you can see that we've got all our waypoints up through there. And really, we're going to be leveling off at 7,000 there, which is why you can see that green arc roughly lining up with that. And it's going to bounce around a little bit, but the computer's going to do a great job of getting that to level off right at that waypoint, and then we're going to stay on there until we manually start setting our descent instead of letting the flight computer take care of that for us. So we'll keep on going along until we make that sort of like turn over and we're at 7,000 feet. So a couple of things that they have on the descent checklist, which is a good thing to do. We talked about changing over your standard at 18,000 feet and going over those sort of waypoints in your descent. The other thing that they would like us to get set up beforehand is our actual, I would consider this more of an approach checklist, but because we are, there's not a lot going on during your cruise and descent that, we can get things sort of set up. So we want to get our auto brake set over to 3. Is that on 3? That's on 2. Over onto 3. Our transition altitude, local pressure, we've already got that taken care of. Our approach minimums. Now that's going to be down to each individual airport. Again, they show this on a chart on the tutorial, but we can have a look at our approach and Navigraph and have a look at our minimums. Now our minimum or decision height is going to be this one here, which is 512. So we can enter that into the system here, so that way we do get that audible warning. And you're going to do that with this guy here. We're doing it by barometric pressure because essentially that's what that 512 is listed as versus like an absolute, I guess is a good way to put it. So we can go ahead and twist this, and you can see down here, this is where it's changing. It does accelerate as you turn it because we do have to go up to 512, and we can back it off now, and it jumps around a little bit. There we go. So there we are at 512. You can see we've also now slowed down to 250, which is what is in our CDU for our descent under 10,000 feet, which is what it's getting us to. Speaking of 10,000 feet, we can come up here and pop on our landing lights. Everything else is good to go. And I don't know why it slows us down to 240. It technically, I believe, should be 250, but this approach maybe, let's have a look at the approach chart just to see if they do require 240 instead. 280, 250, yeah, see, so it should be 250. You can override that if you want to, but we'll keep it as is. Then as far as our approach reference, we can just double check that down in the MCDU or the CDU. And we've got everything set up here for our ILS and good to go. So you can see we are approaching that waypoint to begin our sort of speed restriction and manual descent. So the way this is going to work is we're going to select our speed mode. You're going to go ahead and push that in, and it's going to bring up the speed in there. We want to go ahead and set that down to 220, and we can introduce flap 5 to help slow us down, and then we can take our altitude and we're going to select that to 5,000 and push. Now we can then take our vertical speed and we want to set that to 800 feet per minute. So you can see we are slowing down and we are descending down to that 5,000 feet. And that's where we kind of want to hit that Mike J waypoint. Once we hit Mike J, we're going to, let's see, stay on course, and then level off 5,000 feet, and then that's when we're going to do a direct to Mosby, and from there, that's we're going to descend down to the 3,000. So we're coming up to Mike J. So now we can go ahead and come down to 3,000 feet, which is our fix for the approach. We are going to do vertical speed and come down to 800. Now we can come down to our CDU, and this is how you do those direct again. So you're going to hit the waypoint you want to go direct to, and oops, let's clear that out. So hit that button, it's going to pop it down in the scratch pad, and then you're going to click on the top one that you want. You do have to execute this though. So we're going to go ahead and click execute, and now you can see that we are turning over to the right. And they say about 1 mile out, we want to press the approach button, and then we're going to reduce speed to 180 and set flaps to 20. Prior reaching Waxen, which is the sort of glide slope point, we're going to see the active pitch mode change from GS on the the PFD FMA. So what that means is that we are going to be captured on the glide slope, and we can then start our sort of like approach, and we're going to start seeing some things change on here for the auto land, and we'll also get set up as far as, you know, gear down and all that sort of stuff, which we kind of already have configured. You can see we just had our 1,000-foot warning for our 3,000-foot mark there. I'm going to come back over to our map so that way we can see where we're at. There's Mosby up there. We get our distance set here. Once we get about 1 mile in, I'll probably arm it a little bit beforehand. We're going to go ahead and hit that approach button, which is basically going to take care of our altitude. This is our missed approach altitude, so we already have that set. We won't need to change anything there. And if we want to, we can come over quickly here and have a look at now our approach chart and Navigraph, and let's do the overlay. You can see that that's where we did that direct, and we're now flying direct to Mosby. And once we hit that Mosby, that's where you can see that Waxen is where we are actually going to start to descend down to, but we're going to capture that approach beforehand. All right, we're 3 miles out. I'm just going to go ahead and arm the approach now. And you can see underneath here, we have it showing the LOC or localizer and GS for glide slope. So it knows that once we get to a point that it's able to pick that up, then it's going to automatically switch from this LNAV and altitude hold. So we're held at 220. There's the localizer. It picked it up, so it's going to start to, you know, join onto that actual waypoint. And we can go ahead now and get ready to slow down. So we're going to do 180. And we can come to flaps 20. And here's our flaps gauge, and you can see that little progress bar to having it coming down to 180. This is now lit up as purple, which is our glide slope. So just checking this over again, we're currently speed setting at 180. We're captured on the localizer. We're still holding at 3,000 feet until we intercept the actual glide slope to carry us down. We have our minimum set. The approach is loaded and everything is good there. We can go ahead and just a little bit here, we're going to do our speed to VREF plus 5. Now, if you remember on our CDU, if we come over to the init page, our V2, let me go previous page. Actually, it's showing that it's 141 here for the flap speed of 30. I think I misspoke there where they want us to do... Yeah, our VREF, not V2. So VREF plus 5. So that's where that plus 5... Oh, actually, that's our wind correction. But 141, so we want to do 146. I'll probably make it a little bit higher. That's our 2,500 foot warning that we just had. You can see we are captured on the glide slope. So we can go ahead. Are we quite at waxing yet? We are not. But we can go ahead at this point and drop our landing gear. And this is a little bit early, but just to do it for tutorial's sake, we should be doing it in another 1.4 miles. But we can now go ahead and come to flaps 30 and set our speed to that 146. I'm just going to round us up a couple of knots just so that way we have a little bit of a leeway there to have it come in, because as you can see, there's our reference speed there and our reference speed listed there. So it's a small margin, and if this starts to try and capture the ILS by sort of swimming a little bit, so you can see like right now we're a little too low, so it's going to have to burn off a little speed. So I like to keep that up a little bit more than plus 5, although by the book you should be plus 5. You can also see now that we have a couple of things in here. We have rollout, flare, and land 3. As long as conditions are right, that is what you're going to see for our auto land. So as we come in, we shouldn't have to touch anything until flare comes up, and that is where we are going to bring our throttle to idle and engage our reverse thrusters. The aircraft should, by itself with autopilot on, maintain the center line. We have our auto brakes on and our speed brakes armed. So we shouldn't have to do really anything here besides getting our throttle to idle and engaging those reverse thrusters. So let's see how that goes, because sometimes it's hit or miss. And like I said, because we're at 148, but you can see we're 146 and a half. It says approaching minimums. We're going to continue. So I'm just keeping my eye on that flare. There it is. So we're coming to idle. And there's the reverse thrusters. It's keeping us on the center line. Auto brakes are on. I'm going to go ahead and apply brakes as well. That will turn these two off. We're coming up to 60. We can come out of reverse. And there we go. That was actually a really good landing for the auto land. That worked out very, very well. So just got the brakes on here. We're going to bring our flaps up. Go ahead and pop off those landing lights. Pop on the taxi lights. Turn off the strobe light. And make our exit here. Oh, I still have... Autopilot was still actually engaged, so it wouldn't let me turn off centerline. So that warning there is because I hit the autopilot disengage button. You're going to have a cast message there. They talk about this in the tutorial about setting keybinds. Another way to do it is actually just to hit the auto disconnect button there, and then you are good. So we're going to just hold short after clearing the runway here. And just kind of go through a after takeoff checklist. I think I put the parking brake on. Did not. Parking brake is set. So that was a very good example of doing an auto land, and it worked out great. So our after landing checklist: landing lights are off, strobe lights are off, taxi lights are on as required, auto brake is up, flaps are up. Our speed brake, I believe, goes back down on its own, which it does. So we are good there. The MCP autopilot is off. Auto throttle switch, we can go ahead and turn that off. Flight director off. And then this is where you want to actually get our APU powered up, so that way once we get to the gate, we will be able to turn that on and shut down the engines. And we'll just keep an eye on when those are lit while we are taxiing. Besides that, we are good to go. Shutting down is very, very simple in this. So we'll just taxi over to one of the gates. I'm not sure which one is heavy or not, but we'll just find a good spot. And I'll show you the very quick shutdown procedure for this wonderful 747. But like I said, this isn't a heavy gate, but we are good. So we do have the APU available, so we can go ahead and click on that, which will then allow us to power down the aircraft as we get prepared for the ground crew to start getting things taken care of and not interrupt. But you know, one thing I didn't do that had no effect on anything, which is interesting, is that we never turned on our hydraulic pumps, but it worked out totally fine without them. So that's a little disappointing. I would have liked to have seen that actually give me some sort of warning or something, but it didn't. Interesting. Definitely missed out on that one. It's sure in the checklist though. So as far as shutting this down, it is very simple. As we reach the gate, our APU is running, and then we can just go ahead and shut down the engines. And all we're going to do at that point, actually, I'm going to turn off those taxi lights so we're not blinding everyone. To shut down the engines, all we are going to do is come down here and actually do cutoffs on all of those. And you can see that those are spooling down. Yeah, I would have thought there would have been a CAS warning for the hydraulic pumps not being on, but apparently that was not the case. If I would have checked the status screen, I would have saw that they were not on there. But anyways, now that those are off, we still have that APU running. We can come up here and we can go ahead and turn our beacon light to off, which lets the ground crew know that the engine is no longer running. But you can see we still have full power. And if you wanted to go through a full shutdown, which they don't go through in the tutorial, you're just going to essentially do the reverse of what we did to start it up by switching off all the different pumps and the packs and all that sort of stuff, turn off the anti-ice and all that sort of thing. But anyways, I think most of you get the idea now of how this aircraft works, all the wonderful features it has now that working title has sort of taken it over. And I hope you enjoyed the flights. And it is great to have, I think, a video to follow along with that, although I missed a couple steps here and there and abbreviated certain areas. But thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.